Welcome to the Alcohol Minimalist Podcast. I'm your host, Molly Watts. If you want to change your drinking habits and create a peaceful relationship with alcohol, you're in the right place. This podcast explores the strategies I use to overcome a lifetime of family alcohol abuse, more than 30 years of anxiety and worry about my own drinking, and what felt like an unbreakable daily drinking habit. Becoming an alcohol minimalist means removing excess alcohol from your life so it doesn't remove you from life. It means being able to take alcohol or leave it without feeling deprived. It means to live peacefully, being able to enjoy a glass of wine without feeling guilty and without needing to finish the bottle. With science on our side, we'll shatter your past patterns and eliminate your excuses. Changing your relationship with alcohol is possible. I'm here to help you do it. Let's start now. Well, hello and welcome, or welcome back to the Alcohol Minimalist Podcast. With me, your host, Molly Watts, coming to you from, it's a marginal Oregon. I think marginal is the best word for it. Been really rainy. Golly, was it rainy over the weekend. But my friends, on the horizon, I kid you not, there are 70-degree days in the forecast right now for next weekend. I am absolutely ecstatic. I cannot wait. Please, please, weather gods, just let that forecast come true. Is it too much to ask? How are you doing? Welcome and welcome back to the show for those of you that are longtime listeners. Before I get into this week's podcast episode, which is an interview that I did recently, I do want to just talk with you again about some free resources. So first and foremost, I have the ebook, Alcohol Truths, How Much is Safe. You can download that over at www.mollywatts.com. And in it, it kind of outlines some of this science that we talk about all the time here on the podcast and the truths about why or why not we would want to include alcohol in our lives and some of the stories that we've held on to regarding alcohol being good for our hearts, maybe the idea that alcohol helps you relax and unwind. Some of those initial science type conversations are outlined in Alcohol Truths. And there is also a risk rewards analysis that is included that I have you look kind of at the way that you're including alcohol in your life and understanding how the financial burden, the social risks and rewards, and the physical risks and rewards. As far as a free resource goes, it's pretty darn great. And it helps you understand what a safe relationship with alcohol might be, right? Because that's one of the questions I get all the time is how much alcohol is safe. So go check it out, Alcohol Truths, and it is at www.mollywatts.com. I will also link it in the show notes. On to this week's show and with my guest, Celeste Yvonne. Celeste is an author. She is a recovery coach. She is someone who is 100% sober, but we talk a lot about a different kind of topic, and that is mommy wine culture. Mommy wine culture is so prevalent, and having this conversation, whether or not you're going to include alcohol in your life in a minimal way or not at all, it's important to understand how much of this narrative is being driven, right, by sources and society and the industry itself, the alcohol industry itself, understanding the narrative and the important story that we're telling our children, right? I so enjoyed my conversation with Celeste and sharing her book, which is called It's Not About the Wine, The Loaded Truth Behind Mommy Wine Culture, is something that I really wanted to be able to do for all of you. I think you're going to love hearing from her. I will link in the show notes where you can check out all of her work, get a copy of that book. I highly recommend it. Here is my conversation with Celeste Yvonne. Good morning, Celeste. Thank you so much for being on the Alcohol Minimalist Podcast. This is an important conversation we're going to have, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thank you, Molly. I'm very happy to be here.
and let's be fair, it's been a few challenging invitations by because of me. So I appreciate your patience in terms of me having to reschedule us a couple of times, and I appreciate that too.
Well, let's face it. I feel like the winter season is just busy and chaotic, and the weather's everywhere. So we're all there. We're all in
Yeah.
that place where it's just like we're all hanging by a thread.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, I mean, for us in Portland, we don't get snow and ice very often, but as I told you, I was on my way out of town and needed to get out of town. And thank God I did, because boy, I got to miss most of it down in sunny Arizona. So
Ooh,
enjoyed it, but then wasn't able to do this. So glad we are connecting now. And let's talk about the book that you wrote, which is a culmination, I think, of a lot of things of your kind of your journey. And I want to talk to you about that too. The title of the book is It's Not About the Wine, The Loaded Truth Behind Mommy Wine Culture. Let's discuss first, what is mommy wine culture, and why is it so important that we have this conversation about it?
absolutely. And there is some confusion around what is mommy wine culture that I'd like to clear up. I think a lot of people mistakenly think mommy wine culture is about mothers who drink wine. And I would disagree with that. My definition of mommy wine culture is the social narrative that playfully jokes or implies that moms need alcohol to cope with raising their children. And it's that kind of using parenting as an argument or an excuse to drink that I feel like really fills in the blanks of that definition.
Right. Well, it makes it, and it if it has done nothing else, it makes it socially acceptable to fill up a tumbler with alcohol to go to the little league game. I agree with you that there's a very dangerous narrative there as well, but it's really increased the prevalence of over drinking because it's made it completely normal for moms to be sitting in the bleachers or sitting anywhere, or at the PTA meeting or wherever, drinking while they're doing it.
It adds a level of justification to what we're doing, to, yes, this is hard, you deserve a drink. That
Mm-hmm.
can be really dangerous. I think a lot of people throw it out there as funny, like, ha ha ha,
Sure.
mommy needs a drink.
Yeah.
But the context and the nuance is many people, myself included, took that subtly as permission.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
it gives that permission. It normalizes drinking to cope. It normalizes drinking to parent. And that's where kind of the danger lies, is that place where it between what's funny and what's actually happening. I've heard several stories recently where people have said, I started putting alcohol in my tumbler. And I I made myself think it was okay, but deep down I knew it wasn't.
Right.
But the cultural narrative is it's okay, or wink wink. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where I feel like we get this gray area where humor becomes truth.
Yeah. The danger that of the message that we're sending to our children too. I think that part is often overshadowed. Like, it's just not really, like, it's kind of like, oh, they're kids, they don't really know what's going on, like they won't pay attention. But yet, as they grow up and become parents themselves, they see then these the onesies that say, I'm the reason mommy drinks.
Yeah.
Like, that's is that really funny? Is that cute in any way? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
The
that's a really weird narrative that we think is like, it's is that really okay?
the level of blame and shame that that puts on now the next generation of children uh, cannot e- I can't think of a harder thing to throw on our children. I am a daughter of an alcoholic, and I
Yeah.
say this in the book.
You and me both. It's
I
just,
Can you imagine if your parent walked around saying, "My kids are the reason I drink"? Like, to add that heaviness to what is something that is trauma I will always carry. I can't even imagine how much that would have fed into that.
I'm wondering to myself, like out loud, thinking, I wonder if the humor at the, because back in those days, back at least when my mom was drinking, I mean, mommy wine culture wasn't a thing yet. That
Yeah.
was not a part of it. That was just not the way it was. And I wonder now, I'm thinking to myself, would it have made that easier, less isolating for me? I don't know. Just thinking back on my young self. But what I can say without question, and I'm sure you can would say the same thing, is that no one needed to ask me if I felt like I was the reason that my mom drank, right? Like, I mean, that was a narrative that I believed for a
Mhm.
long time. So and yeah, I mean, but she was problematic. She was definitely physically dependent and she had alcohol use disorder and the whole thing. The mommy wine culture definitely, as you mentioned, isn't directed at women who may necessarily have a problematic relationship with alcohol. It's just more normalizing, alcohol use amongst society, which again, I think we always need to be willing to question. It's the stories behind why we're drinking that makes that we need to be challenging. And I think really at the heart of everything, that's what your book is about. It's the stories, right? And it's the narratives and
Mhm.
it's what we believe, what society believes about what a mom does, what mothers, the support that mothers actually need and don't get. And so let's talk a little bit more about that. So let's first
Yeah.
share for my listeners, tell me a little bit about your background, how you came to be writing this book about mommy wine culture.
Yeah. I dabbled, I was a professional doing marketing in corporate America well, for the most part, for 20 years. But on the side, I was a mommy blogger. And I talk about being part of the problem. I used to make, mommy needs wine memes. I was definitely a contributor to the culture. And what happened was I saw my drinking, when I became a mom, my drinking changed. And not to say I wasn't a problematic drinker prior to having children, but there's something about having children that it changes everything changes. All of a sudden, I now have children dependent on me. And I like to drink to get drunk. I often needed a morning to recover from the night before. And parenting's not conducive to that. And
Mhm.
I quickly realized, very quickly, that I could not be the parent I wanted to be and drink the way I wanted to drink. And that realization hit hard and heavy to the point where I quit cold turkey after a panic attack. And now I'm 6 years sober, but I started writing about my sober journey once I hit 1 year sober and realized this is the road I wanted to take. This wasn't a temporary reset. In my first year, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know, all I knew was I couldn't drink today. And once I hit 1 year and I'd seen just positive after positive after positive come out of this new life I had created, I just wanted more of that. And the allure of alcohol really distinguished or extinguished itself. Uh, and that made all the difference for me to the point where this didn't feel something to be embarrassed about or ashamed of. This is something I wanted to explore and get excited about and tell other people about. So my mommy blogging really took on this new level of sober motherhood and starting to share that journey, which is what really instigated the book. And also kind of feeding off this, why are mothers drinking more than ever? We are, women are drinking more than ever. Why are mothers drinking more than ever? How does mommy wine culture and this narrative and advertising and marketing feed that?
Mhm.
How are they related? And then the last thing I was trying to figure out was, how does the mental load of motherhood contribute to this message and to how mothers are drinking more than ever. And I kind of tied it all together with my own story and with my recovery journey, as well as talking to other women who also quit drinking and are now sober.
Yeah. And that's kind of the way, just exactly what you said, how the book is laid out. It's the what is it? What is mommy wine culture? Your story, and then how to help people. This is what I think that the one of the reasons you and I wanted to connect and have this conversation. Understanding that addressing the mental load is really at the heart of what we're talking about. Whether or not someone chooses to become completely sober or simply drinks a lot less or drinks less or doesn't drink, and I told you that before we jumped on. The same talk, the same conversations, the same work. I tell people all the time, becoming an alcohol minimalist is really the same work as becoming sober, because we have to address the why. We have to understand what it is we're trying to alleviate with drinking, right?
Yeah.
Because if we don't do that, then we'll just turn to something else to try to fill that void potentially with something else that's, also not, if we don't fill it with something else constructive, we can fill it with something else destructive. So we want to understand all of that. And this part, the mental load part of motherhood, is a big issue. It's a big issue just for women in general. So let's talk about that in terms of what your research for the book kind of led you to, because we all have like our own story of what happens to us as moms. You have two boys, I believe. I have
Mhm.
four, so I've got double the trouble.
Yeah.
And I say all the time, I used to be one of the most dramatic people you'd ever talk to, because I would just like look at you like, well, I have four kids, like duh, like I mean, hello, this is my life, right? The narrative that I told about that was fueled by kind of the mental load of motherhood that I didn't really understand, both the part that I was playing in it and also how society contributed to it.
Mhm.
So tell me about your research found about what the mental load of motherhood is doing to women.
Yeah. So the what I would call the mental load is, the responsibility of parenting and household duties. But in addition to the organizing, the reminding, the planning for family, and it all incorporates cognitive, emotional, and mental labor. So that's what we're kind of talking about when it comes to the mental load. Something that I saw and researched was how over the generations, as women are going back into the workforce more and more, the domestic labor has not shifted to accommodate that in a heteronormative man and wife relationship,
Mhm.
where there is a man and wife, or husband and wife living in a home. For the most part, the woman in that relationship is still taking on the majority of the labor, regardless of her work life. And that I feel like has become this perfect storm of women are back in the workforce, and we have shifted that perspective in once you become a parent, you can go back to work, but we haven't changed the messaging or the context around how household duties need to change at home.
Yeah, and do you think this at all? Do you think would you, or I don't know what you found, and but this thought came to me as you were talking. I also feel like women, like, to prove that we were worthy of being in the workplace, and being moms, like we feel like we have to do it all
Mhm.
because it proves our superpowers, like, right, you know what I mean, like we have to do it all, because if we don't do it all, they're going to take part of that, the work part, away from us.
Yeah, the cultural messaging that we've seen over the years isn't so much a demand for men. You need to pick up your share of the load at
Right.
home. It's women. We're superhuman. We're Wonder Woman. We have superpowers. Look at us go. Like we're amazing. We can do it all. And social media really played into that with mom influencers, making it all look seamless and easy and making it feel like this is part of motherhood, that asking for help is a form of weakness.
Right.
Yeah, that message.
If you can't do it all, you're not a good, like, you're not a valuable mother. Like, you're not you're not, you're screwing up. If you need help, if you need support, if you actually would like somebody else to help you in the household, you must be, you're just not doing it right. Right.
Right. And that's the exact opposite of the message that mothers needed, which is, if you have a partner at home, that partner needs to up the ante and stat because everybody's working really hard and domestic labor should not fall on the woman in the situation just by default.
Yeah, I do have to say, and I'm going to shout out my husband here because I've been very fortunate. My husband, and people that listen to this show know, he's very supportive. He allows me to be able to do what I do, and he's always been very partnered with me throughout our raising of four children. Now, when initially he worked outside the home and I did not, so it felt, like I was then I went back to work, and when I went back to work full time and had kids, there was an adjustment period for
Right.
us. But I just kind of lucked out in that department, or we had conversations about it. I didn't find myself. I think for me, I was like, I don't understand how people do it. I can't. I mean, I'm just like, this just isn't going to work for me. And my house kind of looked like not every, it was a mess. So I was like, well, I guess that's just us. Just a quick break to talk with you more about Sunnyside. Did you know that Sunnyside uses science to help you reach your goals by focusing on 3 scientifically proven superpowers that you have? Number 1, the power of pre-commitment. Each week, you set an intention for the week ahead that includes a tracking goal, a drink goal, and possibly a dry day goal. Number 2, the power of conscious interference. You'll learn the habit of tracking each day as soon as you finish it, which creates a mindful pause before you start the next day. And number 3, positivity. We know that this is a big step that can be tough at times, right? And that's why Sunnyside offers coaching through SMS and email to give you support, advice, and motivation. You can check out a free 15-day trial at www.sunnyside.co/Molly. That's www.sunnyside.co/Molly. I probably have a little more, I don't know, just my mindset has always been a little bit less ensconced in the feminine roles. And so maybe that's why. Maybe it's because I have 4 boys. I just was like, okay, well, whatever. The house is going to look like a war zone. I'm going to be okay with it.
Yeah.
But definitely one of the things that, again, in your book, you talk about, this is something that I think is so important. And I never allowed myself the time to just to really think about it, I guess, was just how much I was shouldering and how much I did feel very much like I had to get right back into it all, like even after I had my kids.
Yeah.
And I know you talk about in your book about postpartum depression and how we really don't have good mechanisms in place for support there, even for women.
No, in our country specifically, we don't support mothers after the child is born, uh, not nearly in the way that mothers need it. Um, at the federal level, we don't offer any sort of postpartum maternity leave. we're one of the only countries in the world that doesn't offer paid or unpaid maternity leave. It's up to state
Right.
levels, and when you do take it off, when I tried to take this time off, I was in a company with less than 50 employees, thereby they didn't have to give me any time off as part of
Right.
their rules. And I was just lucky because my boss, as he told me, he's like, we're going to let you take this time off and you'll still have a job to return to because I'm a nice guy. And to have 6 weeks off to heal from what is such a massive instrumental life change to everyone involved is not enough time. And I think most mothers would agree with that. And yet, many women in the United States return to work within the 6 weeks postpartum. And you tell people from other countries that, and
Yeah.
they are shocked
Yeah.
because they know, like I needed much more time than that. Well, we don't, many of us don't get that option. So we just deal with it. And if you are more inclined for postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression, then you're really in for it for the next 6 to 12 months because that means that you have the additional mental struggle and mental health challenges that are then associated with postpartum health while also being in charge of and being responsible for a newborn's life. And it's
Yeah.
just a lot. It's really challenging. And again, instead of people getting um, loud about we need to take care of mothers better, again, I feel like the first message you hear postpartum is wine's going to be your new best friend.
Right.
Lean on alcohol. Like, this is what's going to get you through it. And for somebody, especially somebody who might uh, be more prone to postpartum depression or anxiety, alcohol is probably the last thing they need to be consuming to take care of themselves.
Absolutely. And I think that's again where the mommy wine culture and the marketing behind wine, which has been very, I mean, very much they're spending millions of dollars, ladies, to market wine to women. And so that it all comes together, right? And it all just keeps feeding on itself. And then as women are in these moments of, I don't want to say that not they're compromised. They may not be they're I don't want to say weak, but it's a moment, times a season of life where you're really stretched thin, where you're feeling really, where maybe you're having hormonal imbalances, you're not
Mhm.
getting enough sleep, where you're getting, where the postpartum depression is really real. This is the answer they're hearing is just have a glass of wine and you'll feel better.
Right. And when you dig into the science and the research of alcohol and how it works, and you see like it does us zero favors in terms of our mental health.
Yeah.
It zaps our energy. Um, it's ethanol. I mean, it's a depressant. I mean, all of these factor into why would we be pushing this on mothers who are already more sensitive um, and more prone to struggling than they ever have been before. That it's the opposite of what they need. What they really need is they need more help. They need more support. They need better support systems in place. And they need longer maternity leave. I mean, there's so many things they actually need. And I feel like we have just kind of filled in the blanks with this laughable message that somewhere along the way got completely thrown out of context and to be taken way too seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. In the third part of the book, you're talking about how, like, kind of how we can go about changing really our relationship with alcohol and how we can change things and not just our own relationship with alcohol, but you say these are some of the big topics. We need to speak up about the dangerous undertones of mommy wine culture. We must continue to demand a more equitable distribution of labor at home, in addition to more flexibility in the workforce. We should work to end the stigma around mental illness, including depression. We must start treating big alcohol more like big tobacco by holding the alcohol industry accountable, pressuring them to communicate the health risks of their products. We must connect and communicate with teens, preteens, and even kids in elementary school on the risks of drinking and the effect of alcohol on the body. And we must demand workplaces make efforts to eliminate toxic workplace drinking culture. You hope, right, that people read this book and that they get inspired personally to change their own relationship with alcohol, but also it sounds like you really hope that people will start working to change the narratives across those kinds of bigger topics, across big alcohol, across the workplace, across the mental load of motherhood.
Yeah, I think once mothers or parents get out of the thick of early motherhood, where
Yeah.
and they get a little bit of their time back, I think that's when we like I'm at the my kids are at the age now, they're 7 and 9, where I can actually start doing something to advocate. And there are organizations that are completely devoted to exactly what the list you just went through. And like Chamber of Mothers and Moms First US, these are grassroots organizations that are doing the lobbying work. And we once we have time and availability, we can get involved because this is what we've gotten through the thick of it. Or I'm speaking for myself. I've gotten through the thick of it. I have to do something now so the next generation isn't stuck with these same cycles and same problems and same narratives. And this is how I can help contribute to reducing the next generation's mental load.
We talk about it all the time here on this show. It's like we have to be willing to address the reasons and the underlying stories and those narratives. And this is a different, and I talk about it with people changing their own narratives, right? Because we got to change how we think to be able to change how we feel, to take different actions and to get different results in our lives. That's true for everyone on a personal level. But I think it is critical that once you get to a place where you've got your space, you've got your own mental health shored up and you're feeling better, we need to start taking action and advocating because we don't want. And that's one of the reasons that I do what I do, because I don't want other generations of people growing up with with parents who misuse alcohol. And whether that's over drinking or having a dependent relationship on alcohol, regardless, we need to start using our voices collectively to change that.
A lot of people argue that we've lost the village, the village mindset of parenting and of motherhood and of taking care of each other. And I guess I would argue this is the closest I can give back and be part of the village that I did not have in the world that we live in right now. This is the closest it can come, is me being that voice for mothers who are new to motherhood or who got stuck in the drinking cycle and don't know how to get back out. I can be here now, coming out from the other side of it, to say, here's the changes we need structurally and socially, and here's what you can do to break the cycle.
Yeah, and to that point, I want to highlight for folks in your book, in the last section, in the how section, each chapter ends with a subject of lighten your load, and it's really just some ideas for whatever that specific chapter is on how people might, for talking about mental health, talking about the herd mentality, talking about things that, all of this that we're talking about, all of those different areas. And you offer some practical suggestions and also some practical suggestions for people who are starting a sober journey and what that might look like.
Yeah, I feel like the goal of that section was both to help people lighten their load, like what can I do right now today because I'm drowning.
Yeah. Right.
But there's
Yeah.
also things in there for I'm out of the chaos of early motherhood. What can I do to kind of build these, these bigger narratives, or to share these stories, or to get the message out, or to support the next generation. So kind of a little bit of a mix, regardless of what stage you're in motherhood.
This book, again, folks, it's called It's Not About the Wine, The Loaded Truth Behind Mommy Wine Culture. Celeste Yvonne, thank you so much for coming on the show. While I know you are completely sober, and that's a great choice, and I say it all the time, being a completely alcohol-free is a wonderful choice. At the root of this conversation is what is fueling anyone's decision to overdrink and what we need to be addressing that and what that is. And in this instance, for you moms, because I know there are a lot of you listening who are believing that you need to drink to de-stress, to unwind, to relax, to get yourselves through motherhood. I really hope that you'll pick this book up. I will, of course, link it in the show notes. And where else can they connect with you, Celeste?
Yeah, I'm on social media. My handle is the Ultimate Mom Challenge. And you can also find me on Substack. I post weekly sober inspiration pieces every week.
Great. I will link all of that in the show notes, everybody, so you can find her. Celeste Yvonne, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you again for bearing with our recording schedules. And I can't wait to share this message, this book with my audience.
Thanks for having me, Molly.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Alcohol Minimalist Podcast. Take something you learned from this week's episode and put it into action. Changing your drinking habits and creating a peaceful relationship with alcohol is 100% possible. You can stop worrying, stop feeling guilty about overdrinking, and become someone who desires alcohol less. I work with people in 3 ways. You can learn about them over at www.mollywatts.com/workwithme. Or better yet, reach out to me directly. It's molly@mollywatts.com. We'll jump on a call and discuss what's best for you. This podcast is really just the beginning of our conversation. Let's keep it going.